My mother died before I turned 12. And she left 4 children younger than me. Back then, it didn't matter what kind of work a woman did. She made $2. Where I growed up, you didn't even know you was poor because 2/3 of people was rocking the same boat that you was in. You worked, you enjoyed what you had. That's just the way life was. We'd have a church full of people at that time. Something was always going on at the church. My husband was a coal miner. Wasn't nothing here but coal miners, honey.
We went 13 miles through the heart of this mountain.
There were men shooting coal, there were men shoveling coal, there were men hauling coal.
Established in 1917, the coal camp at Lynch, Kentucky would eventually host 10,000 people from 38 nations.
This whole town was built by the United States Steel Corporation solely for the coal that came out of here. And that first year, those miners mined 1 million tons of coal with picks and shovels.
The granddaddy of the operation was Portal 31, a vast underground mine situated beneath Black Mountain, Kentucky's highest peak.
Portal 31 had, at its heyday, it probably had 2,500 miners mining 3 shifts a day. My father came from an ethnic region of Yugoslavia called Montenegro. And Montenegro translates into Black Mountain. So he was born in Black Mountain, came to Black Mountain. He worked in Portal 31 under Black Mountain and died from the black lung associated with the coal from Black Mountain.
But black lung was not the only risk associated with Portal 31.
The city had a whistle. And when that whistle went off, you knew that something had happened. That was the number one question, was, what happened and who was involved. And that's the time when every woman went to her knees that knew God.
Almost you could say it was a crapshoot sometimes, whether they were going to come home or not.
Men would count on their fellow workers, but they counted on their God more.
It was a rough time. I mean, there was one time I worked 64 straight days, 14, 15 hours a day because of geologic problems.
In the coal mine, when danger came, underground, you didn't know who was black and who was white because everybody was black with coal dust on them. And that mountain didn't care who it fell on.
I had 7 acquaintances that got killed. 2 of them were real close.
I've seen things that no human should see.
Dottie Russell was 12 when a mining accident took her father's leg. Despite the best efforts of a protective mother, the trauma hit hard.
She sent me to my aunts who lived about 6 houses down the road, and there was this huge package in the swing. And I sat down in that swing and I knew what was in the swing. It was hard, you know. That I'm sure they took that somewhere and buried it, but it was devastating.
We had cut 2 or 3 blocks out. We just started retrieving back, and you could start hearing the pressure in the earth set down, and it go, and then it go, boom, and it vibrate you from the inside out. It's very, very eerie. I've had so much pressure from the top coming down before that it'd blow my hard hat off the back of my head, and I'd have to go get it 15 or 20 foot away.
But the greatest threat facing miners was the prospect of hitchhiking coal dust. If they were going inside the mine was going to leave inside of them.
How is it that when one's father died of black lung when they were 4 years old, that they would then still go into the mines themselves, knowing the danger, that was involved with it, and why they would choose to do that? Because it's about honoring our past. It's about honoring our heritage. It's about honoring our parents, our grandparents, who they were. That's a big part, that's an important part of the community here. That's, speaking of bones and sinews, that's the sinew that really holds so much of this area together.
So we were all tight-knit communities, all tied together by coal.
The demand for coal was a natural outgrowth of an expanding national infrastructure. America was growing up, and it was coal that fueled the giant blast furnaces, which transformed iron ore into steel. One company led the way, U.S. Steel. Heading into the 20th century, the corporation operated 41 mines and over 200 manufacturing mills. It accounted for an astonishing 30% of the world's steel output.
United States Steel went out and actively recruited. They actually went to New York. They were actually at Ellis Island. They would bring people off the boats that were kind of looking around and obviously had no place, not sure where they were going, that landed here and had nothing taking them away from the dock. They, no family, no job yet. And so they would just kind of pick these people and ask them if they wanted to come work in the mines. You need a job, you're new here in the country, we can set you up with a place that'll put you to work, and you'll have your own little community because we have other people there that are like you.
It was the Industrial Revolution in a time-capsulated form. I mean, all of a sudden, boom, there you are with all these houses and all these people and all these groups.
The mining companies served as seed, spark, and glue.
Benham and Lynch were both built by coal companies. These were coal camps. And so every aspect of the city life was a part of that corporation.
They owned everything. They owned all the houses we lived in.
No effort was spared to keep mining families healthy and happy.
The big store in Lynch was where you shopped if you worked for United States Steel.
There wasn't anything you would need that wasn't there.
And there was more. State-of-the-art schools, a theater featuring nationally known entertainers, and a 108-room luxury hotel. There was also an elite hospital, staffed with highly trained surgeons and medical support personnel.
It was a first-rate hospital for many, many years.
Company-sponsored sporting events, carnivals, and July 4th celebrations were always well attended.
They had bands and games and all this kind of thing, and that the company would bring in huge trucks filled with ice cream, and you could go in and you could eat all the ice cream that you wanted for that day.
The camps at Lynch and Benham were culturally diverse. Here, workers from every corner of Europe blended with mountain farmers and African Americans from the Deep South. Company architects divided the valley into multiple sections to accommodate the rapidly growing population. The miners soon personalized these sections with names such as Shacktown, Gobbler's Knob, and Smoky Row.
We all provided for each other. We were family. We were more than communities. We were family.
There was a support system, you know, just from being that close.
Coal may have brought them together, but it was food that made them family.
On weekends, instead of just going out of town, you went to one family's house, to another family's house. You just visited. And everywhere you went, there was food. There was always food, good food.
We had a neighbor that was Italian, and you could smell her cooking. I mean, wonderful smells, you know.
I always called the mom and dad of those families aunt and uncle. It was in high school before I found out we weren't kin to them. They were not my aunts and uncles, so I didn't know that. I thought we were kinfolk because we treated each other like kinfolk. I mean, I would go over to their house and stay with them even if their children weren't there, and vice versa.
For more than a century, miners have blasted and dug nearly 1 billion tons of coal from the mountains of Harlan County. In the 1920s, Portal 31 miners established a world record by extracting nearly 13,000 tons of coal in a single 9-hour shift, enough to fill 256 rail cars.
It was the largest coal producing per cap on the daily basis of any mine in the world.
With the outbreak of World War I, coal mining operations in Lynch and neighboring Benham took on strategic importance. State governors and even President Calvin Coolidge made personal visits to cheer the miners on.
We were a community that was proud, and we stuck together.
World War II saw national steel production rise dramatically, and the mines of Appalachia played no small role in supplying U.S. troops with the tanks, ships, and aircraft that would eventually bring victory. But as peace returned to Europe and Asia, a new war was heating up that would have profound consequences for the families of eastern Kentucky. The war on coal.
All these people around here was employed by U.S. Steel. They thought U.S. Steel would always be here. And U.S. Steel failed and left. And we found out U.S. Steel was not the God we thought he was.
The decline of the coal industry has hit everybody here very hard.
And I know as mayor, when one of the mines shut down, that made a huge impact on the revenue for the city of Lynch, and we weren't ready for that.
Darlene Hall grew up at a time when poverty was creeping into many area households.
My dad's fingers was all crooked from the rheumatoid arthritis.
He couldn't really grasp the steering wheel on the coal truck.
So he would get the boys that were young, they'd get right beside him on his lap and steer the coal truck while he would push the gas and brakes. They would go on top of these mountains and pick up coal, put it in this coal truck, and then come back to Cumberland and sell it to feed us. I remember we never had no milk, we never had a pop, never had candy. That was my dream when I was growing up, to have an RC and a bologna sandwich. There was no jobs here, nowhere to turn, there was no hope, of anything good happening.
So people left in large numbers and never came back.
People get tired of trying after a while.
They came softly, into a setting both bleak and beautiful, abandoned, yet strangely alive. Intercessory seed bearers, quietly depositing prayers of faith on behalf of communities searching for an identity.
This group of ladies, every year they would go into a different small community in eastern Kentucky. They would get a motel room somewhere, and they would stay there for 2 to 3 days, and they would pray intently for that community. Then they would move on quietly, and nobody ever knew they'd been there.
In the Tri-Cities of Lynch, Benham, and Cumberland, the greatest need was for a kickstart of hope.
The dreams need to begin on the inside, with the people who are already there, who they may be so down they don't even know that they can dream.
As prayerful emissaries from the outside arrived on the scene, they discovered at least one such dreamer close to home.
They found a woman who told them she'd been walking up and down the streets of Cumberland for years, praying for God to move in power here.
By all accounts, Mike and Darlene Hall were the perfect match.
I got married in 1982 to my soulmate. I was so in love.
2 years later, on a balmy May morning, Mike woke with a fever and uncontrolled shivering.
We took him to the hospital, and they said that it was a bacteria that was poisoning his blood so fast that they didn't think he would live for 15 hours.
Dr. Bill Medina, Mike's attending physician at St. Joseph's Hospital in Lexington, did his medical oncology training at Yale University.
We received a phone call from the emergency room at a hospital closer to where Mike lived, telling us that they had this patient in shock.
The suspected cause was a pneumococcal infection, but there was a complication. Mike's spleen had been removed during an earlier bout with Hodgkin's disease, and this left him particularly vulnerable to the invading bacteria.
It's one of the most frightening infections that a human being can get. A person can go from being perfectly healthy to close to death within 12 hours.
Mike's organs were shutting down.
His kidneys were making very little urine, and over the next couple of days, his kidneys would stop making urine completely. The infection had spread into the membranes around the brain and in the spinal fluid around the brain and the spinal cord. Mike was one of the sickest patients I've ever taken care of.
A blood coagulation disorder was causing Mike's skin to turn black.
And then his body began to decay. They had to give him 57 pints of blood.
He developed gangrene.